see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and today I'm here with Tal-Chen Rabinowitch, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. Thank you for joining me for this dialogue about empathy.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so as I understand it, you're a PhD student and you're exploring the nature of musical group interaction with children and how it can be directed towards long-term and emotional empathy. Is that correct? And
yes, exactly. I'm doing a PhD in Cambridge University at the Center for Music and Science with Ian Cross and Pamela Bernard, and I'm exploring the relationship between musical group interaction and empathy, and how musical group interaction may enhance empathy in children, specifically in children.
Yeah, there was you've written several papers on this that I've seen, and there was recently an article written about your work.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Let's see, I actually have it up here. I can show it. It was called "Making Music Together Increases Kids' Empathy," and I think there's a lot of other articles as well.
Yeah, that was the Pacific Standard paper that was written about the article. Yeah. So that was the study that we've done, the empirical study that we've done about how musical group interaction had enhanced the capacity for empathy, especially emotional empathy in children.
Yeah, well, I thought maybe we could go through kind of your work and through what was written about it in the article, but maybe start, like, how did you get started in empathy and kind of your interest in empathy? And because it seems to be a real passion of yours if you're like doing your whole PhD on the subject.
It's true. It is one of my passions, but it's two things combined, I would say. So I started looking at, first of all, the relationship between music and emotions through not recently, like in the past, when I was in my bachelor studies in Israel, and I was working with children which had cerebral palsy and on the autistic disorders, and I really saw how music does something to you in terms of making your emotions more open and more wide. And I thought there might be something there that has to do with empathy as well. So I started off looking theoretically at how the underlying cognitive mechanisms of music may enhance or may strengthen the capacity for empathy. And this is how it all started. So I said it's one of my passions, but it also seems that there's something in music, specifically in musical interaction, that has to do with empathy.
So you made some kind of connection there between empathy and the playing of music.
Yeah, so it's so the basic idea behind the connection between music and empathy is that when you play music together, you tend to do all kinds of activities, right? So when musical group interactions, when two or more individuals play music together, they need to do all kinds of things in order to keep the music going, to keep it flowing, to keep it harmonious.
Yeah.
And these things, you can call them processes, you can call them musical components or features. I call them underlying cognitive mechanisms, which what underlies the musical act, the music making together. And it is possible that these things help you also to empathize. And I'll give you an example. So one of the most basic things you do when you play together is keep the beat. Everybody needs to keep the beat together in order for, it doesn't have to be synchronized, right? You don't have to be on the same beat all the time, but you have to keep the frame together in order for the music to flow. And this is something very basic you do when you play music together. And this, in a sense, I think helps you to attend to one another, to listen to one another, to be in contact with one another, and especially in music, where the emotions are very much surfacing and they're part of everything. So I think being synchronized and being entrained during musical group interaction might actually help you to be entrained and to be synchronized and to attend and listen to other people, also in general context, not just in music, and may also help you to empathize with them.
So when you're synchronizing with in music, you're kind of practicing getting in sync with other musicians and what the tones are and how the music is. So kind of that perception and that synchronization you feel is kind of deepening empathy in a general way.
Exactly, exactly. I think I look at it. I have this metaphor when I think about what you said just now. Is that think about a painter who every day looks at colors, and he can distinguish between this red and that red, and he can see many different colors in what another one might see just one color. And it's really like this. When you play together, you tend to refine the ability to attend to someone else, to synchronize, and to be part of someone else in terms of being together. So it just helps you in when you come to the world, to non-musical context as well, to be with someone, to feel for someone, to synchronize, to attend.
Well, I know you're coming at this not just from the academic, studying it, that you're also a flute player or musician. So you're coming at it from an embodied, experiential approach as well.
Definitely, and it's been a large part of it because I play in a band, and these things do happen. I mean, you can talk about how you feel when you play together. So there's definitely underlying processes that connect us together when we play, and these processes are very strong. And I believe that they go over, they spill over after you finish the music making to general contexts as well.
And so how did you kind of structure your study? And maybe you could just kind of outline the studies that you've done. Has it been one study or kind of it looks like maybe a series of studies?
So it was a one large study that we've done. So what we did was this. So we had an idea about all the processes that might be shared between musical group interaction and empathy. So synchronization would be one of them, right? And we also had imitation. So imitation is something we do a lot in music. We tend to imitate each other's phrases. We tend to imitate each other's musical ideas. We tend to imitate the movements of other players when we play together. And imitation is also considered to be a focal process of empathy. So we tend, sometimes when we look at someone, we tend to imitate their facial expressions implicitly. And this kind of imitation helps us to assimilate the emotion of the other person in us. So this is another example of a process or a feature of music that might be shared between music and empathy. So there's synchronization, imitation, there's others, more complex ones, such as, for example, shared intentionality and intersubjectivity, where you feel the other's cognitive and affective processes transpiring in you. So we've taken these components, and for each of them, we devised a set of games, musical games and tasks. So, for example, in synchronization, we had this game where you improvise rhythm. So you give kids all kinds of percussion instruments to play with, and you tell them, hey, now you're going to improvise, but I'm going to change the rhythm, okay? So it's going to be a little game with rhythms. So what you need to do is just listen and flow with the rhythm. So they started playing together, and then one child changed the rhythm, and then everybody had to tune themselves into his rhythm. So that was just one example of the game. So we had many games for synchronization. We had a game for imitation, where you need to match the other's rhythms or just musical phrases, where we ask the children to either imitate each other's phrases when they play together, or simply match them to play something similar but not exactly the same as the other one. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we had set of games for each of these, and We designed a whole program for a year.
Wow.
Where we had musical games going gradually from the basic components such as synchronization and imitation to more complex ones such as intersubjectivity and shared intentionality. And I ran it for a whole year, and we've also had control groups of children who had a drama interaction program or a games interaction program instead of music. And I measured empathy before and after the interaction, and after the program, the musical group interaction program. And what we found was that there was overall an increase in empathy, specifically in the music children, the children who participated in the musical group interaction program, and not the children from the control groups. So that was the overall finding of this study.
I'm wondering what were the actual tests of empathy? You said what you're using as the tests of empathy. I know there's a whole variety of them, but
yeah,
out there.
Right. So we've had 3 different measures for the capacity of empathy, and we were especially concentrated on emotional empathy. So the ability to experience something of the emotion that transpires on the other person. Not the cognitive aspect of empathy, which is to know or to be aware of the other's emotion. So we used 3 measures. One of the measures, the first one was a questionnaire for children and adolescents, the Bryant questionnaire, which is targeted at emotional empathy. It had all kinds of questions. So that was a verbal measure that we used. We also used 2 non-verbal measures, which used films and actors, a facial expression of actors. So in one of them we showed children, a child protagonist usually, going through an emotional experience. So it could have been sad, happy, surprised, positive as well as negative emotions. A very short scene. And then we showed the children 6 different facial expressions of the same actor. And we asked them, how did you feel when you watched the movie clip? And they had to select the feeling that they had when they watched the movie clip. And we said that a match and that was based on a preliminary experiment that we've done, to match between the emotion of the protagonist and the emotion of the actor. So a match had, indicated that the child had assimilated or had experienced something of the protagonist's emotion, if he had felt this emotion when he watched the movie. So that was the second measure. Mm-hmm. And the third measure was a measure that we designed. It was another measure, and we wanted it to be implicit. We wanted as much as we could that the children wouldn't suspect that we actually want to tally empathy or emotional empathy here. So what we've done was we used their memory or a pseudo-memory task. So what we did was, it was a very similar procedure to the movies and faces. So we showed them the protagonist and a movie of the protagonist going through an emotional experience. And what we did was this. So just before the movie, we showed them 2 different expressions of the same actor. For example, sad and happy, okay? And we asked them to try and remember as much as they could one of the expressions, okay? And we showed them for 250 milliseconds, so very, very short time. They could only have a glimpse of this, not really see them or try to remember them. And then we showed them the movie, and the movie, for example, was on a frightened expression, okay, frightened emotion. And after the movie, we showed them 5 different facial expressions, okay, and we asked them which one of these facial expressions you remember seeing before the movie. So for them, it was a memory task. But actually, it wasn't a memory task because none of these facial expressions that appeared before the movie had actually appeared in the faces after the movie. And the idea was that if they had some of the feeling of the protagonist in the movie, they would try and they would think, or they would try and see the world in this image, and I'll explain it. So there are a couple of studies that show that when we are in a certain emotional situation, for example, when we're happy, we see the world as happy. So everything looks happy to us,
right.
okay? But when we're sad, everything looks a bit sadder, okay? So when we're in a certain emotional situation, we tend to process the world or the stimuli which we encounter in this direction, in this emotion. So if they are a bit sad because of the movie, okay, then they would tend to think that they remember the face which was sad, okay? So this is, oh, I think it was sad, because they don't have a real cue for memory, because there was no, the faces that appeared before the movie hadn't really appeared after the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So the only cue they have to try and solve this riddle is their own emotions and the experience they had after the movie. So that was the rationale of this specific measure. And we actually did see that there was a significant and a very big difference between the children in the music group and the children in the control group. So the children in the music group tend to remember better the emotion that was congruent with the protagonist's emotion in the movie.
So they're able to read it and the other person's emotion, kind of sense it, and to kind of maintain that awareness of what it is that they saw in the emotion that they read.
I'm hoping so, yeah.
And what's kind of the level? I mean, how much better in empathy? I mean, if you had some kind of I don't know how you can kind of measure that, but, you know, like 25% more empathy, or, you know, how do you know what I mean? Like, what is the quality of the degree of empathy that
I don't know. This is just comparing. I don't want to talk about any degrees of empathy or anything like that. It's just comparing between themselves from the beginning to the end of the study.
Oh, I see.
Between them, or between the musical group interaction children and the children who went through the drama interaction program, or the children who hadn't taken part in any interaction or program. So it's just about comparing these groups, these children, between themselves.
Well, the whole empathy in the arts is really of real interest to me, because I do kind of this freestyle dance, you know, every week. So it's a very, you know, the dance, I think, just like music. I mean, there's a lot of music. I mean, it's dancing to music, is really around, you know, perceiving the other, and I do a lot with mirroring. So, you know, you're talking about emotional empathy, which seems to me to be based on kind of mirror neurons, maybe kind of that reflecting. Is that how you're seeing it?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get into mirror neurons. It's a very, very interesting issue. It's a very interesting question. I think, I don't know what the mechanism behind imitation might be, but I know that probably motor resonance or imitation is a mechanism which helps us to assimilate the other's emotion. Could be mirror neurons, could be something else.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, but I know that I believe that this mechanism, you know, the simulation theory of empathy. So you simulate someone, and then it helps you to empathize. It helps you to understand from the first person perspective more than from the third person perspective what is going through the other person. So it could be mirror neurons, it could be something else, but something in imitation probably has a connection to empathy, I think.
So mirroring the other person, kind of what they're doing it through movement, or through dance, movement, or through music, is kind of getting that synchronization with someone else, where you kind of synchronize. And I actually do that in the dance. Is I'll see somebody the way that they're moving, and I'll kind of mirror what they're doing as a way of kind of absorbing the energy and the emotions of who they are. And there's something this is coming not from the, you know, studying it, but from the embodied part. And I can actually feel myself starting to move into a synchronized harmony with them. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a very pleasurable experience. And, you know, I ask people, usually I'll start off these dialogues about, well, tell me, what's your metaphor for empathy? What is empathy like? You know, usually empathy is described as, you know, standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes. And someone I just interviewed, they said it's like strings, musical strings coming in tune to each other. So
Right.
do you have a metaphor of what empathy is like, you know, metaphorically?
Yeah. I think I see it as something, I think it's being very geographically very close to each other. So maybe even a merge. I know empathy is not a merge. It's being yourself, but also experiencing something of the other. But I actually feel it is kind of blurring or being geographically very close to someone. I think I have a very embodied metaphor of what empathy is, maybe. This is what I think.
It's somehow being like physically, geographically close to
I
someone.
think so. Very, very close. Even like blurring. It's like you have someone who's blurred into each other. So this is a little bit of what I feel empathy is. Yeah. What is your metaphor?
My metaphor is empathy is like a cornucopia.
Okay.
You know the cornucopia, the horn of plenty?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that for me the opposite of empathy is like a desert, a monotone, lonely desert.
Right.
You know, where it's just like it's like the Sahara, right? It's like all there is sand, and that's like in terms of experience, it's a very monotone experience. Whereas with empathy, it's like as I'm watching you, I'm seeing your movements, I'm hearing your voice, your tone of voice, and I'm experiencing kind of all the, you know, who you are as another being. And it's a bit like a cornucopia of experience. And you're seeing my hands move around. I don't know if you are, but, you know, so you're experiencing that and maybe some of, you know, my energy. So in that way, I kind of focus on the creativity and the richness of empathy, you know, the richness of experience. And you're kind of focusing on the coming together aspect of this.
But I have to say, I always remember what Marcel Proust said, and this is kind of guiding me. And you asked me why I'm doing empathy, and I actually had two answers for that. So one answer was because I feel music and empathy are related, and empathy is such an important asset or capacity. You know, we don't have to say that; it's obvious. But also, I think it's going to be really boring not to have the ability to empathize, because, like Marcel Proust says, you can go to Mars or Venus, but that's not going to be interesting. What's interesting is going to be to behold the universe through the eyes of another, through the eyes of 100 others. Right, to behold the universe that they behold, and to see through their eyes. And I think this is really interesting. It's an interesting experience, and it's interesting in its own.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's colorful and yeah.
It's that aspect of expanding your experience. It's not just your own experience. You're starting to see the world through, and it kind of creates more of a richness of experience.
Yeah, definitely
aspect.
So. Definitely.
Was that who I'm not familiar with. Is that's not the mime, is it? Or
say again,
the person you were mentioning, Proust?
Marcel Proust? Yeah. The French writer.
Oh, the writer. Okay. And that's what he said. He said to see through everyone other's eyes is what's
the most interesting journey one can ever have.
And what would be the opposite for you of empathy then, if you had a metaphor of the opposite?
Yeah, I think so. So you can see a wall behind, or a wall between two people or groups as well. So you can have empathy between groups. So there's kind of something that doesn't allow one to enter or to get acquainted with someone. So it's something very rigid.
Mm-hmm. So kind of a rigid wall between people that keeps them separated. Then
I think so.
Yeah. Well, if you looked past through, you know, your life, was there some moments where you kind of saw the power of empathy? You know, it's like, wow, this is really important. You know, was there an actual moment, that kind of experiential experience?
I don't think there was one particular moment, but I think I see it all the time. I think it's the basics of our ability to interact in anything. I mean, it begins with being attuned to my baby, you know, and knowing when I need to feed him or her. So they cry, and I immediately know what I need to do because something transpires between us. And I think it's the most basic capacity to understand others' feelings, to be aware of them. We wouldn't have survived this society without it. So I don't know if there's a particular moment, but I think it's there all the time for me.
Yeah. Sometimes there's a sudden moment. Some people, they mention going to a workshop and being heard in a way that they've never been heard before. Mm-hmm. And that was a moment. And for others, for me, it's the same way. It's kind of like this slow process of learning about empathy. So there's been no, kind of magical moment, but a whole series of kind of experiences.
Okay.
So, sorry, go ahead.
How did you, no, go ahead.
So what I'm looking at is also is how do we build a culture of empathy? How do we raise the level of empathy within society? And so that's kind of the other part of this is, from your work, have you found clues, insights of what we can do to raise the level of empathy within society?
Yeah. So definitely. And this is one of my incentives as well. And I think that, I think I have a suggestion. And it's just a suggestion that music is a tool, a really, really nice tool that can sharpen or expand empathy. It can refine our capacity for empathy. It can encourage us to feel empathy towards other people. And I can say, yes, there's something in music that hints towards the fact or towards the possibility that it is there to help us to do this as well. So musical group interaction, when you concentrate on the other, so that was one of the things that we did. So it wasn't just playing music, it wasn't playing a certain kind of music, it was playing together and to have a focus on the other and to do it as a group, to try not to be competitive. So if you do it in a competitive environment, I think it's going to be really different. So you do it for fun, you do it in order to engage in interaction, in musical interaction, and I think this stands a chance. And I would say that if we want to have a culture of empathy, and I think we certainly do want, music could be one of these things that people can do together. And I just have to say, I'm not saying the music is mystical in any sense, that you do music and you become more empathic or something. It's just that they're a special and unique constellation of all these things, all of these components in music that come together in a really, really nice way. And if you play together with someone else and you focus on the other, this might sharpen your capacity to empathize. It's a possibility.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, with that, playing with others, there's a quality of, coming in harmony, and that harmony seems to be, it's just fun and it's enjoyable, and it creates, it has, maybe the oxytocin or something. That would be something to check too, is oxytocin levels within. I don't know, have you done that with?
No,
I don't guess you don't want to do blood drawing or something of the kids,
yeah,
but that would be something else. Is like, how do the oxytocin levels, rise within music?
Yeah, that could be very interesting to look at.
So it's just that pleasurable experience, and then you kind of get practice in mirroring and attuning to others. So with the music, yeah,
definitely. It's not just. I think it's not just the pleasureness. It's about really kind of working on these basic mechanisms, working and refining, being synchronized, working and refining, being imitated and in imitating others, working on shared intentionality and shared attentions, and working on being in intersubjective situation with others. All of these things which exist in music. And I'm not saying, of course, that they don't exist in other disciplines or other fields, such as dance, for example. But I think it's specifically in music, there's this combination of them, which helps us towards empathy.
Yeah, so when we're doing the music, we're actually practicing and kind of through practice. Is that the mechanism then? Just by doing and practicing those skills, you're kind of just deepening it, and maybe
Exactly.
the motor neurons are kind of getting practiced and more refined or something like that.
The motor neurons. Yeah, maybe that.
But you're
But
not you don't want to speculate.
no, I mean, I'm saying for this level, I think we don't need this. So we can say there's these mechanisms and these behavioral mechanisms which tend to play together in a very nice way. Maybe in order also, maybe they also enhance empathy. So that's yeah.
Yeah. So where do you think your work will go? Because it sounds like this is going to be a major field of study for you. You'll be continuing this direction, or?
I think so. Yeah. I think I'm going to go for. We're planning on doing perhaps a larger scale study of this empathy and a musical group interaction study. I'm also thinking about children on the autism spectrum to see whether we can do something with them in this musical group interaction program. We're dealing with empathy, which is a social competence that some of them have deficiencies in. So this is another direction. And I'm also looking at how one might be, in a sense, merged with someone else in music during musical group interaction. But that's really, really speculative at the moment. But this is another direction that I'm interested in.
Well, I don't know if that last part you're talking about is I was talking about the dance. What I would do is mirror someone. I would go in and say, I want to get who you are, in the sense that I want to feel who you are as a being, and I want to hear everything I want to hear what you have to say. So you can do that verbally, but you can do it through felt dance movement. And sometimes I'd go into the dance and actually, go in with that intention and actually mirror people. And everybody's moving really fast. Mm-hmm. And then I would try to mirror them, and they would say, oh, I'm not really mirroring them. And then they would actually, slow down so I could kind of get, synchronize with who they are, with what they're doing emotionally and physically. Yeah. And then there's a moment, it seems like there's almost like a clicking in where I know already, it's like I synchronize so much with them. It's almost my dance instructor, Ava, she calls it the third body. Okay. In the sense that it's almost like our consciousness kind of shifts together. Yeah. Becomes one conscious. I already know a lot of where they're going to go. It's all that intentionality that you're talking about. Yeah. And then it's very creative. It's like I will offer an energy, they will play with it. They'll offer an energy, I'll play with it. Yeah. And it's kind of, is that the consciousness, the state that you're talking about? Is that kind of that sort of that merging that kind of happens?
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I think it's a wonderful experience. It's just it's such a wonderful sensation. And I think it happens in music. It's not very common for me personally, but sometimes when you play together, you tend to know what's going to go. But also you because in music, what happens is that ultimately, right, what you hear when you play, you hear the whole music creation, right? You don't just hear yourself. Yeah. So in a sense, in order for the music to be coherent, you need to hear everybody together. And I'm just thinking, it's really speculative, but sometimes when you play together, sometimes you're not sure who's making what. So you're playing something, right? Especially if you're playing with someone on the same instrument. So you're playing, but you don't know whether you played it or maybe it was someone else who was playing it, because you're so focused on hearing everything that something is merging between what you do and what the other person's doing. So it's a similar sensation to what you're saying in a sense, but it also it has to do with I think maybe even more with what music is and how it kind of diffuses, or how it combines itself in our perceptual system, auditory perceptual system. So we need the whole music in order to experience it, and sometimes maybe there's a little merge between us and someone else, but that's just...
Yeah, it's removing that distance that you're talking about. I guess that's the part that you're interested in. How do people kind of merge in that and remove the distance between them? And the other part seems to be kind of holding the whole, kind of, that seems to be a part of empathy is to have kind of like have your awareness be broad and wide, so that you can take in the whole of something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm kind of hearing through your...
I don't know if this is empathy, what I was just talking about. I think it's much more. I think it's a different experience than empathy. I think when you merge with someone, I think you're beyond empathy. I think you're in a different realm. I think you're in a realm where your subjectivities, in a sense, they are not that subjective anymore. So you're a subject, but something, part of you is experiencing the other in a very intimate way, much more than in empathy. I think empathy is where somebody has a very rigid personality and subjectivity, and you can know or you can feel something of that the other, but not be part of it in a sense that you merge with it. So I think this is, I look at it, I see it as a different experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not really empathy, some beyond empathy, I would say.
Yeah, so I guess it kind of brings in the question of what is your definition? How are you kind of defining empathy? Because I just interviewed Daniel Batson. I don't know if you know him, but he's written a lot about empathy, and he has just kind of laid out the way that the word is used. He has at least 8 different definitions of the way that academics are using it.
Yeah.
So it becomes very kind of confusing at some point of, one person is talking about empathy and the other person, for them, it's compassion. And, for one person, it's emotional, and the other for it's a cognitive perspective taking. Right. So how are you kind of defining it? What's your basic definition?
Okay, so to put it simply, I think empathy, I think most will agree that empathy has at least 2 components. So one is cognitive. So I know what you're feeling, I'm aware of it, you're happy, and that's it, I know it. Okay, so that's something I observed. And there's also the emotional aspect of empathy, which we concentrated in our study. Because of the deep relationship between music and emotional empathy, we thought, which is, you can say, I experience something of what you're going through. I feel for you. This is what I would say an emotional empathy could be. And this is 2 definitions that are probably agreed upon in some sense. There's also a reaction. You can have a reaction, and that could also be considered as an empathic response. So to have a suitable reaction, it doesn't have to be that you're sad because someone else is sad, but that you're doing something maybe to alleviate this feeling.
Yeah, kind of an appropriate response to what's happening to someone else. Yeah. Well, for me, I've got, I've been trying to merge all these different definitions of empathy, and I've kind of got 4 parts to it. Mm-hmm. And because different communities use the word differently. So the first part I call self-empathy, and that's kind of self-awareness, mindfulness. It's kind of like what's going on inside of yourself, kind of like an awareness.
Right.
The second part would be maybe a mirrored empathy, or also emotional empathy, or affective empathy, which is that emotional part. Like Franz de Waal talks about that, and from the mirror neuron approach, that we're kind of mirroring. As you're shaking your head, I'm feeling your head shaking. My face is mirroring what's going on with you. You're mirroring what's going on with me. And then the third part is kind of an imaginative empathy, or cognitive empathy, or perspective taking, where, as we know ourselves to be kind of separate entities,
Okay.
you know, self-awareness, that we can kind of take the other person's position, you know, knowing what's going on for them. And then the fourth part is empathic action, which
Right.
is where we're actually, as the other parts kind of get connected, it's how we're kind of working together in kind of an active component. So, and I see that through mediation, you know, when parties are mad at each other, and then you kind of do mediation between them, and then they start working together in this kind of more harmonious way. Or maybe like
Hmm.
instruments, you know, discord, right? There's all this discord of
Right.
instruments, and then they kind of come together and they slowly start learning, and then they kind of create something together. So
Right.
that would be kind of empathic action. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure,
Yeah.
how does that definition kind of resonate with.
Yeah, I think it's I think these latter three parts that you discussed, that you talked about, the mirroring empathy and the cognitive empathy and the reaction is very much, I see it this way as well. I mean, the emotional part, the cognitive part, and the appropriate reaction, definitely. And the self-empathy is a really interesting definition of empathy, which is towards oneself. And I think there's a lot of truth in it. I think that I think it's very interesting
Yeah,
that
that
you
it's
you
not
have,
yeah, it's not so much in the academic world that that word is used, but in the mindfulness community and
right.
in the nonviolent communication community,
Mm.
which kind of
Yeah,
comes out of the work of
right.
Carl Rogers
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Marshall Rosenberg. So, um, so it's
Yeah.
so you know, it's like
No, that's
how to
really important.
what's that?
No, I think it's really important to have self-empathy.
Yeah, that.
Definitely. It. So you think it comes before? It's
Well,
a
I
kind of
kind of see it like a wheel, that they're
okay.
around the wheel, so they kind of all interact.
Okay.
I talked to Marco Iacoboni about this too, and he said we need a scholar to really put this all together, because there's
Right.
no clear definition, and you know, we're kind of
Yeah.
needing more clarity around this. So
Mm.
you know, we're kind of on
Yeah.
the cutting edge here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is a very controversial term, or you can say non. It's not clear what empathy is, but well, I think it might even add to. I mean, the many angles that you have. I think it's leading us also to think about it in different ways and different vantage points. So maybe it has an advantage in a sense that I see empathy as a little bit different than someone else. I think maybe these whole angles of what empathy is, they do exist in this, you know, term, or how do you say, this exist,
Experience, yeah.
yeah, this body of experience that we call empathy. So
Well, that
yeah,
was Marco Iacoboni. I was saying, well, you know, maybe one of these is right and one is wrong, and his thing was more like it's all part of the elephant. You know, it's like all these different parts are just they're all, and they need to just be put together into a,
mhm,
you know,
yeah,
coherent
yeah, yeah, yeah. That for sure
vision
will
of
help.
how they all hang together. So that's another project we're working on too. I'm going to start doing that, some definition, so we can talk about that at some point.
Mm.
So. Well, is there any other kind of thoughts about this that you have that you'd like to share? You know, about your work that you feel we haven't covered, or uh,
No, I don't think so. I
okay,
think I think he was pretty much
yeah.
there. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to keep in contact, because this is like an ongoing project, you know, that I'm doing here. Just, you know, how do we build a culture of empathy, and kind of the work that you're doing is, I think, so important, because it creates the, you know, the scientific understanding and the for policymakers to support the arts. I think in the
Yeah.
schools, because
Yeah.
here in the United States, it's one of the first things that gets cut. They say,
Mm.
well, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic, and you know, forget about the arts. We don't have you know, funding for that. So if
Right.
we can show that, you know, the music is something that deepens our empathy, which is kind of the glue that holds our society together, and that we
Yeah.
have a larger movement, for supporting empathy in society. And if we value empathy, then kind of the work that you're doing, I think, is very important for, kind of supporting that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is where I'm going. This is my incentive for doing this, and I'd really like to take it into this direction, to policymakers, to education systems, to formal education, hopefully something of that. I mean, there's nothing like empathy education in school at the moment or in anywhere else, really. I mean, and if we can show that empathy is something that can be learned or refined through simple activities and enjoyable activities such as music, then I think we're taking it a step farther as to an education for empathy, which could be educated like anything else, probably.
Oh, definitely. There's a program, an organization called Ashoka. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're a social entrepreneur organization. And they're starting to organize to bring empathy education into the schools in North America to begin with. Right. So, from, kindergarten through 12th grade or whatever, that there would be, a systematic curriculum to have empathy education. And then, music can definitely, and the arts in general, to be a part of that.
Yeah. In what ways are they introducing empathy to schools? What are
they? One of the people on their board of directors is Mary Gordon, and she has the program Roots of Empathy, which is out of Toronto, Canada.
Okay.
And then they've just had a contest for best ideas for empathy in education, and they had 600 organizations apply for that contest. Okay. And so they're kind of promoting it. They're trying to, promote it to different organizations and trying to raise, a dialogue about it. And they have, they're a pretty large social entrepreneur organization, so they have some real kind of clout.
Yeah, well, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So, part of this is kind of networking, getting us all people who value empathy for us to network. So that's part of what these dialogues are. So I really appreciate you, taking the time to, share your research.
Pleasure. It was a pleasure.
So.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and we'll be talking again soon, I hope, and hearing more about your research, your next steps, and.
I will, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Then.
All right.
Goodbye.
Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.